Hello, I'm Adam Lowenstein. Welcome to News in Depth, where we take a closer look at the news and issues you need to know about in Brevard County. Thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll look at men from Brevard who are sitting on death row, and we'll tell you why their numbers are shrinking. It's not for the reasons you may think. We'll go back to 1969 as we continue to share your memories of the first moon landing. We'll plunder the murky depths out around Sebastian Inlet as we meet some local treasure hunters. And of course, we'll have another in our series of how-to videos on hurricane preparedness. But first up, a closer look at NASA's space shuttle program. NASA engineers have overcome a hydrogen leak that stopped 3 of this year's launch countdowns. Now, crews at Kennedy Space Center are preparing the Space Shuttle Endeavour for launch as early as this weekend. Beyond this launch, NASA faces a big challenge over the next 18 months, flying the final missions of the shuttle program before funding runs out at the end of 2010. KSC Bureau Chief Todd Halverson was there last week when a fuel loading test proved Endeavour was ready for another launch attempt. He visited with NASA officials to talk about the next mission as well as a tight schedule over the next year and a half.
NASA is gearing up for the launch this weekend of Shuttle Endeavour and 7 astronauts on an International Space Station assembly mission. I'm Todd Halverson of Florida Today, and this is a big one for NASA. A crew of 7 astronauts will be delivering and installing the 3rd and final segment of the Japanese Kibo Science Research Facility. With us today is Mike Moses, the manager of shuttle launch integration at the Kennedy Space Center. And Mike, what's it feel like to be at this stage of International Space Station assembly?
Well, this is a pretty big deal for us. You know, it is, like you said, the final assembly mission for the Japanese part of the station, and we're nearing the end of the assembly part of the International Space Station. We have Node 3 and the cupola yet to go, but after that it's just mostly some logistics staging. So this is a big step to finally finish up some of the major construction parts of the station. There's a 6-man crew on board right now. Science is really picking up, so the Japanese exposed facility that we're taking up is really a unique capability to have payloads outside of the space station with an airlock to allow them to come in and out and be changed out. It's a capability we don't really have right now on station. So that's a big deal. It's, like you said, a 5 EVA mission, very aggressive plan. We're going to be pretty busy. We're anxious to get launched and get to it.
Well, the crew is going to arrive here at the Kennedy Space Center later today. Mark Polanski is the mission commander, a veteran nicknamed Roman Polanski. And his crew, he and his crew have a really busy schedule ahead of them. Can you give us an idea of how this shuttle mission is going to flow? Yeah,
we get docked up to the space station, and then we basically get right on board with robotics operations. We're going to run all 3 robot arms on this mission. We have the space shuttle arm, which will be pulling payloads out of the bay. It'll have to hand them off to the space station arm, which will then translate along to where the payload needs to go. And then once we install some of the Japanese payloads, the Japanese robot arm is actually going to be used to pull those payloads off their carrier that come up on the shuttle and install them on their final location on the Japanese exposed facility. And then we start the choreography backwards. We use the station arm to pull that carrier back off, hand it back to the shuttle arm where it'll be put back into the payload bay. And that all is going to take every other day. When you're not doing a robotic activity, you're going to be doing an EVA, which again uses the robot arms to support the crew. So this crew is going to be really busy. It's probably one of the most aggressive timelines we've flown in a very long time. You know, we just came off the Hubble mission with 5 EVAs back to back. This is a much different flavor. You have a day in between, but the quantity of activities you're doing is just immense. The crew's going to be going from one end of the space station to the other.
It's pretty amazing. They're going to be going all the way out to the port side of the International Space Station Central Truss to swap out for the first time these big batteries. Tell us about the batteries and why swapping them out at this point is an important thing.
Yeah, this is a P6, which is the very first power module that we sent up to get early power up to the space station. So it's been up on orbit the longest. Each solar array has a set of batteries on board. There's 12 total. As you go through a solar cycle, obviously when you hit nighttime, your solar arrays don't generate any electricity for you. So that's what the batteries are for, to get you through orbital nighttime. And so we've put enough lifetime on these that now's the right time to change them out. It really takes a shuttle mission to do this, to carry up that cargo. You can do it if you had logistics capability after the shuttle. You just, in a shuttle mission, you can go up, carry them up, do it all in one mission, and then bring them all back, the old batteries back. So it's a really nice package to do on a shuttle mission. So this is a good get-ahead for the for the crew. We'll do 6 on this flight, and then on a future flight, we'll do the remaining 6 on P6.
And these are not little AAA batteries. These are, what, 325 pounds. They cost about $3.2 million a piece, and they're just incredibly important to the space station. Let me ask you this. What I've been intrigued about with this mission is the choreography between the robotic arm operations and the spacewalking all happening at the same time. How difficult is it to actually integrate or plan something that is that highly choreographed?
It's actually really difficult. It's kind of unique. In my old job, I was a flight director back at JSC. I was actually assigned as the lead on the shuttle side for this mission.
Wow.
Before I moved down here. So I got to help a little bit set these EVAs up and the robotic operations. It's changed a little from those initial plans. But basically, that's what you do is you look at the constraints you have and the operations that have to happen in an order, and then you build a plan. And then pretty much the very next thing we do is tackle the what if it goes wrong. Make sure you have a recovery plan, and that's usually the hardest thing to get right, is you want to build a plan that's flexible so that if it doesn't go on time, if it runs a little long, the crew's a little late, something else is happening, it lets us really have some flexibility to resequence things. And when you have so many arms and so many activities, it limits your ability to be flexible. So the guys built a really good plan, but it was a big challenge to get there, and we're gonna see the crew work really hard to stay on that timeline.
One more question for you, Mike. Here we are in July of 2009. You guys have 8 missions left in 18 months, I believe it is. What do you think your chances are of completing the International Space Station and retiring the shuttle as planned at the end of 2010?
Well, you know, on paper, we still look like we have a really good plan. You know, you saw on this launch attempt when we tried back last month, we had a leak at the external tank vent assembly. We call it the GUP. We had a good tanking test last week. We think we really nailed that problem, and we're going to be good to go here on the 11th. But issues like that can crop up. So we know we have a manifest that's supportable and will get us to that milestone by September of 2010. But probably the realistic thing is that a few of those things might hit us, and we might find ourselves needing to extend a little bit. That's a political question then, to look at, do we have the money to be able to operate into the next fiscal year? What's that do to the budget? And with the new administrator coming into NASA right now, those are all questions that are going to be on the plate for him to help us answer with the administration and with the NASA management team. But on paper, we look real good. And you know, one of the nice benefits is the team down here does a fantastic job. You know, the Florida team is the best in the world at what they do of getting space vehicles ready to fly and launch them on time. And the more they get to do it, the better they get. And so we're really at a good pace. We're hitting our stride right now. And you see that with the rapid recovery from this GUP leak that we just had. We got that solved really fast and we're ready to go again. So I'm pretty confident we'll make it with not maybe too much room to spare, but we'll make it.
That's great. Mike Moses, Shuttle Launch Integration Manager at the Kennedy Space Center. Thanks for joining us. I'm Todd Halverson, and join us at www.floridatoday.com this Saturday for live coverage of the STS-127 countdown and launch. Join us then.
Endeavour's mission will be the longest and maybe the most complex construction mission ever to the International Space Station. You can follow the countdown to launch around the clock all week in our space blog, The Flame Trench, only at floridatoday.com. Now, on to an even more complicated space mission, flying men to the moon, landing there, and bringing them back alive. It all started here in Brevard County 4 decades ago, and it left an indelible mark on our community's people, culture, and development. All this month, Florida Today will help you relive that first moon landing, which launched from the Space Coast on July 16, 1969. We've launched a new website where people can share their pictures and their memories and see historic items dating back to the '69 push to launch men to the moon. The site is called Moon Landing Memories, and you can see it at floridatoday.com/moonlanding. We've also prepared a 30-minute television special about life back then in Brevard. The show, Moonstruck, is airing all this month here on WBCC. Here's a sneak preview.
40 years ago, the world looked to Florida's Space Coast as Apollo 11 soared toward the first landing on the moon. In Brevard County in 1969, residents also felt the excitement. They had answered President John F. Kennedy's challenge in 1961, transforming this long stretch of beachfront swamp into America's moonport.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
The race was on, and the missile base at Cape Canaveral saw Merritt Island's Kennedy Space Center grow up fast next door.
We were behind the Russians, and I think all the interest and desires and motivation in those days were, let's catch up with and beat the Russians. So that's the kind of challenge that I think we and every other American I know of accepted and dedicated ourselves to.
We hope you enjoy our special coverage of the 40th anniversary of the moon landing. There's much more coming throughout July. Now, a different kind of adventure and a different kind of environment, the sea. Treasure hunters for decades have explored the waters off Brevard and other Atlantic coast communities, looking for that big find amid the sunken ships at the bottom of the ocean. With the recent economic downturn and skittish investors, these treasure hunters are trying to come up with creative ways to pay for the trips until they score that chest of gold doubloons. We recently went down to Sebastian Inlet and visited with treasure hunter Greg Bounds. Here's his story.
My name is Greg Bounds. I'm captain of the Gold Hound, and we hunt for treasure. These were the storage containers on the Spanish galleon back in the old days. They would hold a lot of things, and food, food items, water, oils, different things. And it would be corked, and they would, they had hundreds of these on the ship. That's why there's so many shards all over the ocean bottom.
You can actually see the finger.
These here are musket balls. They're the old bullets of the day, different calibers obviously right here. Usually we find something. I can't say it's always shipwreck every trip, but we find silver and gold every year. And if we found silver and gold every day we went out, it wouldn't be treasure hunting, it'd be treasure finding.
This is a coin from the cabin wreck, 1715 fleet. It would be a piece of 8. Been with Greg, going on 7 years now, something like that, 6 to 7 years. So learned quite a bit, and obviously hooked on treasure.
Each one of these represents a position that we excavated on the ocean bottom, what the overburden was like. It was exposed bedrock here. We had about 10 foot of viz and about 10 foot of water. Because we have something very unique here, it kind of allows people to get the opportunity to dive down and pick up treasure.
Guy will get tagged and bagged.
The treasure hunting season usually runs from April to September, with the windy summer months being the best time to search. If there's a major discovery, we'll let you know about it. From the vast open ocean to the confines of Florida's death row, where the Brevard County contingent of 12 men has gotten smaller even though there hasn't been an execution since last July. Why? Well, just recently, one man was granted a new trial and another will be resentenced without the possibility of getting the death penalty. Other cases are also being reviewed. Here's a look at what's driving these developments and what they may mean for the men awaiting execution.
As of July 1st, it has been 1 year since Mark Dean Schwab was executed by lethal injection for the 1991 murder of Junie Rios Martinez in Cocoa. Since that time, the number of death row inmates from Brevard County has diminished from 12 to 9, despite no additional executions. Several factors have led to 3 inmates being removed from death row. Crosley Green soon will be resentenced to life in prison for the 1989 murder of Charles Flynn Jr. Originally sentenced to die, the Florida Supreme Court ruled a Brevard jury never should have known about Green's juvenile record while living in New York. The state announced it would abandon attempts to seek the death penalty again. Anthony Welch also will be resentenced this year. The state's top court said a judge erred during the jury selection of the penalty phase of the case. Welch pleaded guilty in 2005 to killing his former next-door neighbors in their Pineda Crossings home, but was denied recently when he tried to withdraw his plea after the court decision. The Florida Supreme Court voted 4-1 earlier this year that Willie Knoll, sentenced to death for killing a woman and her unborn child in 2002 in Palm Bay, was entitled to a new trial. The court said the prosecution improperly excluded a prospective Hispanic juror and made a forbidden appeal to the emotions of jurors. That leaves 9 still on death row from Brevard County. The most tenured on that list is Brian Jennings, who has been on death row for 29 years. Jennings was convicted 3 times of snatching a 6-year-old girl from her bedroom window, raping the child, and smashing her skull. He dumped the body in a canal, hoping the turtles and alligators would get rid of the evidence. George Porter has been on death row for 21 years. Porter was convicted of shooting to death his ex-girlfriend and her new male companion in 1986. Porter had threatened her earlier in the week after she rebuffed his efforts at reconciliation. William Cruz could be considered the highest profile person on death row from Brevard County for his 1987 shootout in Palm Bay that left 6 dead, including 2 police officers. He has been on death row for 19 years. Cruz has a competency hearing scheduled for late July and likely will never be executed because of his mental status. Chadwick Willesee has been on death row for 17 years. Willesee repeatedly struck his neighbor over the head with a blunt object in 1990 when she caught him burglarizing her home. The blows dislodged part of her skull. He then bound her hands and ankles with wire and duct tape and strangled her with a telephone cord. He doused the woman with gasoline and set her on fire. Johnny Hoskins has been on death row for 14 years after raping and murdering his 80-year-old neighbor after sneaking into her home. He then stole the victim's car and drove to his parents' house in Georgia and asked to borrow a shovel. Police caught him driving the victim's car, where evidence in the trunk led police to a shallow grave. Wydell Evans has been on death row for 9 years. Evans shot and killed his brother's 17-year-old girlfriend in a car in 1998 after accusing her of being unfaithful. Evans forced others in the car to drive him 2 places before allowing them to take the girl to the hospital. Randy Schoenwetter has been on death row for 5 years. He broke into his friend's home with the intentions of forcing one or both of his friend's sisters to have sex with him in 2000. When the 10-year-old girl woke and recognized him, the then 18-year-old stabbed her and then the girl's father, killing them both. He also stabbed the girl's mother. Robert Walker has been on death row for 4 years. He was convicted for the drug-related beating, kidnapping, and murder of a man whom he suspected to be an undercover drug agent in 2003. Walker beat the man for more than 3 hours after making him strip. The man escaped and ran a short distance before being recaptured by Walker and a counterpart. They drove the man to a secluded state park and executed him. James Barnes is the newest member from Brevard County on death row, having been there for 1 year. Barnes confessed to the 1988 rape and murder of a woman after sneaking into her home. He was serving a life sentence for murdering his wife. In a videotaped confession he made to a fellow inmate who was helping him convert to Islam, Barnes described how he stripped before entering the home, raped the woman, and crushed her skull with a hammer before torching her mattress.
We'll continue to monitor all of these cases for you, so stay tuned. And finally today, another in our series of how-to videos on handling the hurricane season, which started in June but doesn't typically get going strong in the Atlantic until this month. Today, our own Tim Walters has prepared a video about shuttering your windows as a storm approaches. Check it out.
Storm shutters are important for protecting a home during a hurricane. Even the newest homes are subject to damage from debris if windows are not barricaded. Before storm season begins, make sure your shutters are in working order. Accordion shutters should be tested and lubricated. Bolts for panel shutters should be checked for rust or damage. Securing windows can take hours, so leave yourself plenty of time to put up the shutters before weather conditions deteriorate.
Hungry for more videos? You can find a whole mess of them on our storm season website at floridatoday.com. Well, that's our show for this week, everyone. We'll be back next Tuesday and every Tuesday with a deeper look into the people, stories, and issues that matter in Brevard County. In the meantime, don't forget to follow the daily goings-on in our print product, Florida Today, and online at floridatoday.com. For Today in Brevard, I'm Adam Lowenstein. Have a great week.